Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Monday, October 24th, 2016. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. We've got a new Cold War on our hands, mostly driven by propaganda and hysteria here in these United States. Ginned up for our entertainment and diversion during this political campaign. And it is quite a story. It is just amazing to me. Now, I used the headline today from a 1966 comedy film that was produced by Carl Reiner. And it was a hoot. It was very funny during the Cold War to laugh and make fun of the Russians. We mocked them in many respects in that film. But I feel like it's deja vu all frickin' over again as I see the corporate media, silent political leaders, and others enable or promote the pure propaganda that Russia is responsible for the hacks of the DNC and John Podesta's email account, and that WikiLeaks is either being used or is in league with Russia in an effort to upend our elections this year. And it really has reached a new low, in my opinion. So, what are some of the latest leaks that we're seeing? Well, December 21st last year, a guy I know in Washington, he's a pundit. He writes a blog almost every day. He is a loyal Clinton supporter. His name is Brent Budowski. And he was very cozy with John Podesta, emailing him frequently. And in one of those exchanges last December, Budowski kind of challenges or criticizes Hillary Clinton's commentary about the war in Syria and the status of the U.S. attacks on the Islamic State. And in the exchange where they go back and forth, and Podesta says, well, she's trying to move forward. She's made two major speeches about how we are not where we need to be on ISIS. And Budowski replies, that's good. Sooner it's clarified, the better, and the stronger, the better. Best approach is to slaughter Donald for his bromance with Putin, but not go too far betting on Putin re Syria. Slaughter Donald for his bromance with Putin. I think this is the architecture of the messaging that's come from the Clinton campaign to create the smokescreen that tells her supporters and others who are kind of, waiting in the wings, don't look at these emails because they could have been doctored, they may be false. Now, Budowski actually is the first Clinton supporter to assert that the email in question here may have been doctored. Speaking to RT after the emails were released on Saturday by WikiLeaks, he suggested that parts of the emails had been fabricated, denying that he ever wrote anything about, quote, branding with a hot iron. That's a comment a little bit earlier in the email that I didn't read to you. He says, I don't talk that way. I wouldn't say that, and that was not in any of the emails. So whoever added that fabricated it. As far as slaughtering Donald Trump, yeah, I said that. And the rest of it, fundamentally, does reflect my point of view. And so this is fascinating, because it shows that there was a concerted effort to tar Donald Trump as a puppet of Russia. And as the emails started to surface right before the Democratic National Convention in July, this idea that they're all tainted, don't pay any attention to this because it's just Russian propaganda, started to take hold. And here's another one. This picked up by the dangerous lefty media outlet, The Wall Street Journal. And following an intensive investigation, the Journal reveals that the Clintons and one of their top allies funded Dr. Jill McCabe and her campaign for the Senate in Virginia back in 2015. Dr. Jill McCabe is married to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, a leading figure in the email investigation of Hillary Clinton. And according to finance records, Terry McAuliffe, a man who I met on many occasions, a proud bag man for the Clintons, he's raised millions of campaign cash for them. And he is now the governor of Virginia. And Governor McAuliffe used his super PAC to give almost $500,000 to the McCabe campaign and got another $200,000 from the Democratic Party. Now, Dr. McCabe lost that primary election to incumbent Dick Black, and this is a state Senate race. So if you've never heard of these people, it's not your fault. And Governor McAuliffe says, oh, no, don't try to link these events. Quote, he supported Jill McCabe because he believed she would be a good state senator. This is customary practice for Virginia governors. Any insinuation that his support was tied to anything other than his desire to elect candidates who would help pass his agenda is ridiculous. Of course it is. And speaking of ridiculous, Jim Rutenberg, who covers media and writes a kind of commentary analysis column for the New York Times, he goes in deep, I call it hook, line, and sinker, on the Russian meme. His article published today, you sure have to hand it to the Russians. And they don't let information flow too freely in their own country, and it's why if, quote, U.S. intelligence assessments are correct, they have worked so hard to send it roaring through ours. He says there's a certain kind of brilliance to the way the Russians are said to have hacked the email accounts of senior Democratic officials and gifted the contents to their BFFs at WikiLeaks. Now, listen to the weasel words. Russians are said to have hacked the email if United States intelligence assessments are correct. Now, the caveats are in there, but they don't slow anybody down in jumping to the conclusion that Russia has this full-blown conspiracy running to use WikiLeaks to hammer Hillary Clinton and to try to engineer the election of Donald Trump. Rutenberg goes on to quote Dell SecureWorks, which reported on Friday that Russian hackers that the United States officially blamed for breaking into the party accounts over the summer were involved in the latest WikiLeaks email dump, which came from the account of a senior Clinton advisor, John Podesta. Then he says, falsely, the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, has declined to disclose the source of the emails. Now, that is narrowly true, but on Sunday, Ambassador Craig Murray, who served the United Kingdom as ambassador to Uzbekistan, and whose entry into the United States was almost blocked by the State Department a month or two ago when he came to collect the Sam Adams Award from intelligence whistleblowers. And Craig Murray said, quote, I can tell you with 100% certainty that it is not any Russian state actor or proxy that gave DNC and Podesta material to WikiLeaks. And he said that after going to the Embassy of Ecuador in London and having a drink or two with Julian Assange. Now, you can take that for what it is. I've linked to Craig Murray's blog, and you can evaluate that for yourself. But to flatly say that Russia is responsible and to put this smear on WikiLeaks, and it's not a far-fetched guess that the U.S. pressured Ecuador to cut off his internet service at the embassy in London. And here's an interesting sidebar. Frank Luntz, who is the pollster for Republicans, a pretty evil man who has introduced a lot of focus group tested lingo into the political lexicon, like the death tax, partial birth abortion. Well, during the debate last week, he was running a real-time measurement system where people turn a dial to say they're happy with what they're hearing or they're unhappy. And he said as she dodged the question about her emails by blaming Russia, her numbers tanked. And I can see it on the chart where they dropped precipitously and below about 50% approval. And I have to take Frank Luntz's word for it that was measured at the time that Clinton was doing her pivot. And if you've seen Saturday Night Live, their opening scenes the last 3 weeks have been really incredible. And the gal who plays Hillary Clinton continually does these asides where she's tipping you off about how she practiced being, compassionate and warm, how she practiced her pose, and how she would pivot to not answer a question. Tom Hanks played Chris Wallace, which was kind of funny, and so she shut him down about the email questions. Now, I have been watching very carefully since the third debate last week for critical coverage of the bizarre claim, the outrageous claim that Secretary Clinton made that 17 U.S. intelligence agencies have confirmed Russian responsibility for the hacks of the DNC and the Podesta emails. The only place I can find critical commentary is at the National Review, the conservative outlet that went out of its way to denounce Donald Trump throughout this entire campaign. They published one issue with all of these leading conservatives saying, we got to stop Trump. So their editorial interest would be in being silent about this comment from Clinton because they don't want Trump to win, right? So despite that, Fred Fleitz writes that in last night's presidential debate, Hillary tried to avoid talking about the substance of the damaging disclosures of DNC and Clinton campaign officials by claiming 17 U.S. intelligence agencies determined that Russia was responsible for this. What Clinton said was false and misleading. First of all, the only two intelligence entities, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and Department of Homeland Security, have weighed in on the issue, not 17 intelligence agencies, and what they said was ambiguous about Russian involvement. And I've covered this since they released that statement, led by proven perjurer James Clapper, on October 7th. They used weasel words. They said the hacks are consistent with the methods and motivations of Russian-directed efforts. And, of course, they never mention all the hacking we do in, like the Ukraine election a couple of years ago, or in Russian activities. And so it's very clear, number one, that these two agencies didn't say that there was any evidence that Russia is responsible, and the other 15 agencies, as far as we know, have not analyzed this or reported in on it. Now, they're all spooks, so I'll acknowledge that maybe the Defense Intelligence Agency has some information, but they haven't published it. They haven't said publicly that they told James Clapper that they're on board with the determination that Russia is responsible. And so, over the weekend, I caught up with two people that I have deep respect for. I was at Project Censored's 40th anniversary conference and celebration at Sonoma State University on Friday. And Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media at New York University, and a man who really knows propaganda when he sees it, I asked him point blank about Hillary Clinton's claim.
Have you found any way to confirm Hillary Clinton's, what I call a fabrication, that 17 intelligence agencies have confirmed that Russia is responsible for the hacks at the DNC and John Podesta's emails?
Yeah, I was struck by that moment, too. It took me a while to remove my jaw from the floor after this mind-boggling display of demagoguery.
But then Chris Wallace fact-checked her.
Yes, he did a creditable job, didn't he?
No, he didn't on that.
He did not. No, I share your sense of irony over that. I mean, this was astonishing. The fact that Wallace did do a fairly decent job on other subjects, helps us grasp the fact that there are certain crucial subjects floating around in this campaign season that cannot be discussed honestly. It's deeply alarming because war with Russia seems to me to be a distinct possibility, a high likelihood with her in the White House, and her aggressive McCarthyite effusion was really, really troubling for that reason. I mean, all we know is that some intelligence officials have been telling the press that Russia's behind the hack. claiming that 17 intelligence agencies have come to that formal conclusion was stunning. Yes.
And Trump is the exaggerator candidate here. You know, when he talks about unemployment in the inner cities, he starts at 10 or 20, and by the time he's finished his sentence, he's up to 50. We know that Jay Johnson of Homeland Security and James Clapper, the proven perjurer, Director of National Intelligence, offered assertions on October 7th that they believe Russia is responsible. They offered absolutely no proof, and to jump from 2 to 17 is a Trumpian leap.
Yeah, it really is. It was worthy of the Donald himself.
That's Professor Mark Crispin Miller of New York University. A longer version of that conversation will be released shortly at peterbcollins.com. I also managed to meet for the first time in person Professor Lance DeHaven Smith from Florida State. He is the author of the book called Conspiracy Theory in America. Here's his reaction to my question about Clinton's claims about Russia.
Because this narrative has been very carefully launched that Russia is trying to interfere with our election, and it's a very effective smokescreen. After the recent debate when Hillary made that assertion, I couldn't find any major media organ that fact-checked.
I read massively. I mean, I'm constantly keeping up with the news. I see nothing to that effect. And, you know, I just thought she pulled it out of thin air. But they had obviously planned this to try to link Trump to Russia, and they vilified Russia, and Hillary is very hawkish and appears to be positioning herself to take on Putin in some kind of military way, and it's just a travesty of democratic politics in America.
And journalism.
That's right. You should have all kinds of people coming out and saying, this is BS. We never heard this.
You're allowed to say bullshit.
Okay, well, it's bullshit.
That's Professor Lance DeHaven Smith. I caught up with him at the Project Censored conference, and a longer version of that conversation will be packaged with Mark Crispin Miller's interview and released today or tomorrow at peterbcollins.com and all of our outlets. And every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work with your subscriptions to the Peter B. Collins podcast. I was at the P.O. Box over the weekend, and I got a renewal note with actually a cash bonus from Kate Brennan, who lives outside New York City. Kate, thank you for your generosity and your support of my work. And she is honoring the birth of her grandson, whose name is Levi. Levi, welcome. I hope you become a regular listener to the Peter B. Collins podcast. And I also want to identify John Anderson just renewed his annual subscription. And Martin Bilodeau is a monthly subscriber, as is Joe Clarici. So if you'd like to join their ranks, I would appreciate it. I have, these days, more cancellations than new subscribers. Comes with the territory, I guess. But I'd love to get your support. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. There's a menu button no matter what device you use. Click on menu. It gives you a table. You choose Become a Subscriber. That takes you to the sign-up page. And in minutes, you are all set and ready to go. Over the weekend, 2 days of lengthy protests at the Dakota Access Pipeline site in North Dakota. And on Saturday, the sheriff's office said that officers used pepper spray when some protesters attempted to breach a line that cops had formed between demonstrators and construction equipment. And the sheriff there, Kyle Kirchmeier, used the opportunity to say that this protest is not peaceful or lawful. Well, I don't quite see the basis for his claim. Then on Sunday, after 126 people had been arrested after Saturday's protests, there was a scene where law officers fired at an unmanned drone. Now, we're not sure whose drone it was. Anybody can go and buy a drone. I've got one at home. I can't control the damn thing. I've tried to fly it. But some people are better at that than I am, especially if they've played a lot of video games. So a helicopter that was being used to monitor the protest, and we've covered this in the past, about the surveillance and daily monitoring of the actions of the protesters from the skies. Well, they decided to shoot down the drone. and no one was hurt. Isn't that a relief? More than 260 people total have been arrested since the demonstrations started back in August. Now, Friday's big internet interruption, it was a denial of service attack, a cyber attack, if you will, crippled many websites. I don't believe it interfered with anything at peterbcollins.com, but I don't always know about those things. And it's interesting because we're learning that this denial of service attack used an army of bots from unsecured devices, ranging from toasters and washing machines that go on the internet and send you a text message when your laundry is dry, to all little gizmos, surveillance cameras, other things, many Bluetooth and wireless devices. I've got a wireless printer set up here on my network at the Secret Studio, and most people never change the passwords on those devices, and I'm guilty of that. And so if they leave the factory with a default password, then nefarious individuals can discover that, and they can create an army of these bots, and they can get them with, these rudimentary computer systems that run these devices. They're able to use them to create an army of demands on specific websites, and that's what causes a denial of service outage. Information security people have, quote, been screaming bloody murder about this for years, said one expert. Everything from cameras to toasters, refrigerators, microwaves, and because there's no regulation, the manufacturers don't need to make sure these devices ship with any security whatsoever. Over the weekend, it was announced that AT&T wants to acquire Time Warner. Now, Time Warner was in play just a few months ago when Comcast was trying to buy them or merge with them. And in a rare move from the antitrust division at the Justice Department, they threw enough hurdles in the way that deal was canceled. Now AT&T saying $70 billion will buy them into Time Warner's conglomerate, which includes HBO, CNN, the Warner Brothers movie theaters, studios, and I believe some cable operations, including in Los Angeles. And this has drawn a lot of negative commentary in a brief period of time. Even Donald Trump, Mr., deal maker himself, he said he's against it. Deals like this destroy democracy. It's too much concentration of power in the hands of too few. And here are choice remarks, and pungent and concise ones, from Robert Weissman, the president of Public Citizen. He said, when merger authorities get the call from AT&T asking for approval of its proposed Time Warner acquisition, they should slam down the phone in disgust. It aims to concentrate far too much market, communications, and political power in one corporation, threatening to impede the free flow of information, undermine the integrity of the Internet, raise consumer prices, and further corrupt our politics. This is not a proposal that can be fixed with tweaks, divestitures, or conduct agreements. Antitrust authorities should reject this merger proposal out of hand. In Venezuela, things got even more complicated. Late last week, a court, it was on Thursday, blocked the opposition to President Maduro from starting a recall campaign to remove him from office. And it's very complicated. I don't pretend to be expert on all of the issues of Venezuela, but it's pretty clear to me that President Maduro, the successor to Hugo Chavez, is a target of the United States and the world community. They want him out, and they're willing to allow people to starve and fight over groceries in Venezuela as they find ways to try to take down the elected government of Venezuela. And if oil prices were to rebound, things could get a lot better in a hurry in Venezuela. But until that happens, I think that it's going to be a very difficult situation. Kudos to the Center for Constitutional Rights. They won a victory in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals related to a case against a contractor that tortured people at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. That company is CACI, C-A-C-I. And in a powerful ruling, the judge emphasized, it is beyond the power of even the president to declare torture lawful. The determination of specific violations of law is constitutionally committed to the courts, even if that law touches military affairs. The military cannot lawfully exercise its authority by directing a contractor to engage in unlawful activity. And I would add, then attempting to use their power to keep it all secret. I'm glad to see that ruling. And I'm really troubled by this one. It's outrageous. Nearly 10,000 members of the California National Guard have been ordered to repay huge enlistment bonuses 10 years after signing up to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan. Back in the Bush years, they really abused the National Guard and deployed them and redeployed them time and again. And bonuses were paid to recalcitrant members. About $22 million has been recovered from some 9,700 current and retired soldiers. Now, this is just obscene. A guy named Christopher Van Meter, 42-year-old former Army captain, Iraq veteran, got a Purple Heart. He refinanced his home mortgage to repay $25,000 in re-enlistment bonuses and another $21,000 in student loan repayments that the military says was improperly given to him. I mean, we squandered trillions of dollars, and we're going to screw the soldiers who we persuaded to go time and again for these small amounts of money that are very large in their particular budgets? Words fail me. And finally today in this podcast, I just want to note that Tom Hayden, who was an anti-war activist in the 60s, a real radical guy, he wrote the Port Huron Statement. He went on to become a legislator here in California. 17 years he spent in Sacramento. I got to know him better when he ran for governor in 1994, and he was a frequent guest on my radio show. He helped us oppose the three strikes law unsuccessfully here in California, and we continued to enjoy conversations as recently as last summer. I'm going to be putting together a special podcast in memory of Tom Hayden, so I'll reserve additional comment for that. Look for it in the next couple of days when my schedule allows. But I'm very grateful to Tom Hayden for many of the efforts that he led over the years, and I'm going to miss him. Thanks for joining me for my News and Comment podcast. It's free. It also appears on YouTube for your convenience. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.